When the world is still, before the stirrings of day, before the footsteps of villagers and the creak of carts upon cobblestone roads, there is a quiet that rests like a blanket over the earth. It is in this moment, just as the stars begin to yield to the dim hush of dawn, that the apothecary rises. There is no rush, no loud alarm to jolt one from sleep. Only the subtle shift of light against the walls, and the deep knowing that the herbs, waiting in the garden, greet the day as one must, with patience. The stone floor is cool beneath bare feet. A robe of rough wool, worn but clean, is drawn over the shoulders. A small clay lamp, still warm from the night before, is lit once more. Its glow is soft, dancing across the wooden beams of the low ceiling. The door to the apothecary's cottage opens with a gentle creak, revealing a sky still touched with the last indigo of night. The first bird has not yet sung. The world is holding its breath. Out in the garden, dew has settled like a blessing over every leaf. Beads of silver cling to stems, to petals, to the intricate hairs of thyme and yarrow. The apothecary walks slowly, silently, breathing in the crispness of morning air. The garden is not vast. It does not need to be. But every corner of it has been shaped with care. The beds are bordered with small stones collected from a nearby brook. Their surfaces are smooth, worn down by time and water. Paths of packed earth wind between the beds, just wide enough for a basket to pass. Lavender stands tall at the back edge of the plot, its stems just beginning to sway in the morning breeze. Below it, patches of mint cluster like unruly thoughts. The scent rises, sharp and invigorating, as a hand brushes gently over the leaves. To the east, where the first sunlight touches the soil, rows of calendula nod in soft agreement with the wind. Their petals are closed still, not yet awake. They will open in time as all things do. The apothecary carries a small wicker basket. It is lined with linen, not for ornament but to cradle the delicate harvest. Each plant is approached with reverence, not plucked but offered, only what is needed and no more. The first to be gathered is chamomile. Its flowers are small, white with yellow centers, and they smell faintly of apple and sun-warmed earth. Each bloom is pinched gently at the base of the stem and dropped into the basket with care. There is no sound but the soft rustle of linen and the rhythmic breath of the one who gathers. Nearby, a patch of lemon balm sways, its heart-shaped leaves damp with dew. The apothecary leans close, inhaling its scent, citrus and mint, calming and clear. A few stems are clipped, never from the same plant twice. This ensures growth is encouraged, not stifled. Further along the path, nestled in the shade of a small fig tree, is valerian. Its leaves are darker, broader, and beneath the soil, its root holds secrets, sleep and stillness, peace and ease. It is not harvested today. It is simply checked, a hand pressed to the soil, a whisper of thanks for what it will one day offer. A robin calls tentatively. The sun has now begun to peek over the horizon, painting the tops of the tallest herbs with a golden hue. Shadows stretch and retreat. The garden, once cloaked in mist, now begins to sparkle. The apothecary kneels beside the sage, its leaves soft, almost velvety and colored like morning smoke. A few are selected, turned in the hand, admired for the gentle veins that run like rivers through each one. Into the basket they go, joining the chamomile and lemon balm, the thyme and mint. A breeze stirs. There is rosemary, its needles sharp but fragrant, its resilience unmatched. And hyssop, its blue flowers like tiny bells. Both are approached in turn, both are greeted with whispered words, part of the old ways not forgotten. The apothecary speaks softly, not to be heard by others, but as a habit of connection. "Thank you," they murmur. "Be well. Grow strong." It is not a spell but something older, recognition. The plants respond in the way plants do, by thriving in the next season. Near the garden's edge, a patch of wildflowers is left untended, not for medicine but for the bees. They flit from blossom to blossom, already hard at work though the day has just begun. The apothecary smiles. The bees are not disturbed. The basket, now nearly full, rests on a flat stone warmed by the rising sun. The apothecary stretches slowly, breathing deep the mingled fragrances of herb and earth, of morning and memory. This is how the day begins. Not with urgency, not with clamor, but with intention, with presence, with hands that know the rhythm of plants, and with a heart that listens to the silence between each bird's song. The garden hums now, quietly, peacefully. Insects stir. Leaves tremble. A soft rustle suggests the nearby hedgerow has woken too. And in the distance, the faint sound of hooves on a dirt road signals that the village is stirring at last. The apothecary lifts the basket once more. The herbs within are not simply ingredients. They are companions in care. They will be dried, blended, infused. They will become tea for an anxious heart, salve for an aching joint, tincture for the restless mind. But that will come later. For now, the garden has offered its morning gift. And the apothecary in turn carries that gift back inside, moving slowly, gratefully as the first true light of day spills across the threshold. The door closes with a soft click. The garden once again is quiet. The fields stretch in golden hues, reaching gently toward the horizon. A light breeze rustles the tall stalks, creating a soft whisper that dances across the grain. By late summer, the once green fields of emmer, barley, and einkorn are now crowned with heavy heads of ripened grain, signaling the arrival of harvest season. It is early morning. The sky, still brushed with shades of dawn, begins to brighten with a soft glow. Farmers emerge from their homes, simple mud brick structures with thatched or flat earthen roofs, and gather their tools. Small flint sickles with wooden handles, baskets woven from reeds, and linen cloths used to wrap their heads against the sun. Harvesting is a communal effort. Families, neighbors, and laborers join together, their movements rhythmic and calm. The sickles slice through the stalks with a satisfying swish, leaving neat rows of cut grain behind. Some workers hum quietly. Others work in silence, focused on the task. The heat will come soon, and there is much to do before it arrives. The pace is unhurried but steady. There is no urgency, no machinery, only the soft sounds of nature and human effort. Occasionally, a child runs between the rows, chasing a grasshopper or helping to gather the cut stalks into bundles. These bundles are tied with coarse string or simply twisted straw, then stacked to dry in upright sheaves, tall, lean structures that resemble little huts scattered across the field. By midday, the workers pause. Under a shaded fig tree or beside an irrigation canal, they unwrap bundles of flatbread and dates, sharing a simple meal with water drawn from ceramic jugs. The conversation is quiet, interspersed with laughter or commentary on the weather, the harvest, and the condition of the soil. Once rested, they return to work. The sun is higher now, casting long shadows and intensifying the golden glow of the grain. Dust rises gently with each step. The air is warm but not oppressive, softened by the occasional breeze from the Nile. As the field is cleared, the bundles are carried, either by hand or on the backs of donkeys, to the threshing area. This open, packed earth space lies near the edge of the village. Here the next stage begins, separating the grain from the chaff. Threshing is often done using a technique involving trampling. A wooden board, embedded with flint or stone, is pulled over the bundles, often with a donkey or oxen providing the force. The sound is rhythmic, the dull thud of hooves, the rustle of straw, the soft clink of stone against dry husk. In some villages, children delight in helping, running in circles to keep the animals moving, or dancing playfully over the threshing floor. After the grain heads are sufficiently crushed, winnowing follows. This is a meditative process. A worker lifts the broken mass of husk and grain using a wide, shallow basket or wooden fork, tossing it gently into the air. The breeze, however light, does its part, carrying the lighter chaff away while the heavier grain falls straight down. Over and over, the process repeats. The sound of grain falling to earth has a soft, satisfying rhythm. The cleaned grain is then spread on mats or flat stones to dry. Occasionally, someone moves through, using a wooden rake to turn it gently, ensuring it dries evenly beneath the warm sun. Birds often linger nearby, watching hopefully. Small clay figurines or hanging ribbons are sometimes placed near the grain piles, charms meant to ward off birds and bad spirits alike. Throughout the day, the atmosphere is calm, cooperative. The harvesting and sorting are not only acts of sustenance but rituals of continuity, of a life rooted in rhythm, land, and shared labor. Older villagers often supervise from a seated position, offering advice or stories of harvests long past. Their presence adds a quiet wisdom, a sense of time stretching backward. By late afternoon, the workers begin to wind down. The air cools slightly. Shadows grow long once again. The grain, now fully harvested, threshed, winnowed, and dried, is gathered into large sacks or clay jars. Some will be stored in communal granaries, simple, elevated mud brick structures with small windows to let in air and keep pests out. Others will be taken home to be ground into flour, used in bread, or saved as seed for the next planting. The day ends as it began, quietly. Families return home, dusty and tired, but with the soft satisfaction of a task well done. A soft meal is prepared. The scent of baking bread or boiling legumes drifts through the twilight air. In the distance, the sound of a flute or low drum may rise, played casually by someone sitting on a low wall. The grain, now safe and sorted, represents more than food. It is survival, memory, and hope. Each kernel, once hidden inside a green stalk, now shines in the light of the setting sun, humble and sacred all at once. And so ends the long, gentle day of harvesting and sorting. A timeless practice, repeated across ages and cultures, now quietly recorded in the soft silence of dusk. In the early morning hours, just as the first light begins to stretch its golden fingers across the landscape, the village mill slowly stirs to life. The stone structure stands at the edge of a gently flowing river. Its weathered timbers creak as they settle after the cool of night. Ivy trails lazily up the side of the building, while the moss-covered wheel waits patiently to turn once more. Inside, the air is dry and dusty, yet oddly comforting. The scent of grain, earthy and faintly sweet, lingers in every beam of the ceiling and every crevice of the wooden floor. The miller arrives, boots brushing dew from the grass. He moves slowly, not from tiredness but from habit. He has performed this same ritual for decades. A life of rhythm measured not in hours but in bushels and sacks. He lights a small lantern, though the morning sun is rising. The gentle flicker casts shadows across bags of grain stacked neatly against the walls. Soon the sound of water begins to change. The sluice gate is opened with practiced care, allowing the current to flow into the channel that feeds the wheel. There is a creaking groan as the paddles catch the water and begin their ancient dance. Slowly at first, then faster. The gears inside the mill engage with a dull clunk, and the grinding of stone on stone begins, low, steady, and eternal. Grain does not appear by magic. It comes from the fields, bundled in sacks and tied with rope. Farmers bring it to the mill, their carts pulled by oxen or sturdy horses. Each sack is heavy, filled with the harvest of long months under the sun. Barley, rye, and golden wheat, each one destined for bread, porridge, or beer. The farmers are quiet. There is no rush, no hurry. Just nods and small words exchanged with the miller. They wait their turn. The grain is poured into hoppers, angled wooden boxes that funnel the kernels down between two great stones. These are not smooth but carefully carved with grooves to bite the grain and draw it inward. The stones themselves are living tools. They must be cared for, sharpened with a pick in a process called dressing. It takes hours and great skill, yet the miller does not mind. It is a quiet craft and he enjoys the solitude. As the stones grind, the air becomes rich with the scent of flour, warm, soft, like comfort made physical. Dust floats in sunbeams like golden mist. Outside, the wheel turns on, day after day. Grinding grain is not brute force, it is art. Too coarse and the bread will be gritty. Too fine and the flour will clog the stones. The miller listens with his whole body to the sound of grinding. He feels the vibration in the floor, watches how the flour falls from the chute. His hands test the texture, rubbing it between his fingers. A master miller knows by touch alone whether the batch is good. The grindstone is usually made of French beerstone or English millstone grit. These were quarried from distant hills, transported by barge or ox cart, and installed with reverence. The runner stone spins, powered by the water wheel. The bed stone remains still. Between them, just a whisper apart, grain is transformed. No modern mechanism could quite replicate the miller's instinct. He does not rely on scales or gauges. Only sound, smell, and feel. The grinding takes hours. Some mills run for entire days. The miller may rest in a corner, drinking from a clay mug, while the wheel hums softly, like an old friend, content. Flour, once ground, must be sifted. Large wooden sieves, stretched with fine mesh or cloth, are used to separate the bran from the flour. This is done by hand in slow, careful movements. Sometimes a bolting reel is used, a long rotating cylinder angled slightly downward filled with mesh. As the flour tumbles inside, it is sorted by fineness. Wholemeal flour retains more bran. It is darker, more textured. White flour, lighter and finer, requires more passes through the sieve. The sifted flour is collected in sacks made of linen or hemp. They are heavy though soft to the touch. Often, the miller will stamp them with his mark, a symbol or set of initials, to show where the flour came from. The bagging process is slow. One scoop at a time, the flour is transferred from trough to sack. Each one tied with twine and set in neat rows by the wall. By now, the light through the mill windows has changed. Morning has faded into afternoon. Dust hangs still in the beams of sun like tiny stars. Though the mill is a place of labor, it is also a place of gathering. Children come to peer inside, fascinated by the great turning stones and the belts and pulleys. They are shooed away gently but always return. Neighbors meet here. They talk of weather, of crops, of the upcoming market day. a place to exchange not just flour but news. The miller is respected, not rich but trusted. He is part craftsman, part keeper of the flow of life. Everyone eats bread, and every loaf begins with his stone. Sometimes villagers will leave messages at the mill. A note tucked under a sack. A gift of cheese or honey left by the door. And so, the mill becomes something more than wood and stone. It is a rhythm in the life of the village. A quiet drumbeat beneath the surface. As the sun begins to set, the wheel slows. The sluice gate is closed. The water, now free again, resumes its gentle journey downstream. Inside, the stones stop turning. The mill is quiet once more. The floor is swept. The tools are hung. The last of the flour is bagged and labeled. Outside, the sky glows amber and lilac. The river reflects the fading light like a ribbon of silk. The miller lingers at the door. He listens to the soft lapping of water, to the distant bark of a dog, to the silence that only comes at the close of a good day's work. The mill sleeps now, but it will wake again. Just as it always has. Just as it always will. The final transformation of grain into nourishment occurs in the heat of the oven, where flour, water, yeast, and time come together to create bread, a process both simple and sacred. In this chapter, we explore how ancient and medieval communities baked bread, the social and spiritual rituals that surrounded it, and the evolution of baking tools and techniques that shaped daily life. The communal oven. In many early communities, individual households lacked ovens, leading to the rise of communal baking. At the heart of the village stood a domed clay or stone oven, heated by wood fires and shared by neighbors. These ovens were often located near the mill or town square, and baking days were social events. Villagers would prepare their dough at home, shaping it carefully, scoring each loaf with a personal symbol. Markings were essential. They identified each family's bread once it emerged golden and crackling from the shared oven's depths. At sunrise, families lined up with baskets, waiting their turn. Smoke curled from the flue, and the scent of baking hung heavy in the air. The baker or oven tender managed the fire and decided when the heat was right. Loaves were slid in with wooden paddles, sometimes lined up by size or type. When finished, the breads were drawn out one by one, still steaming and bearing the marks of a slow, smoky transformation. Daily bread and social meaning. Bread was more than food. It was the backbone of the diet and carried deep cultural meaning. In medieval Europe, a household's wealth often determined its bread. The wealthy ate finely sifted white bread called manchet, while the poor survived on coarser loaves, darker and denser with bran. Despite this division, the act of breaking bread was universal and deeply symbolic. In many faiths, bread represented sustenance, humility, and divine provision. To share bread with another was an act of peace, generosity, and communion. Even the crumbs were not wasted. Children were taught to gather every piece fallen on the table, for bread was sacred. In some homes, a cross was drawn on the underside of a loaf before slicing. A blessing and a reverent gesture acknowledging that bread was a gift not to be taken for granted. Ingredients and preparation. The basic ingredients for bread, flour, water, salt, and a leavening agent, were simple yet powerful in their alchemy. Wild yeast from the air, nurtured into a bubbling starter, leavened the dough over hours or even days. In some cases, a bit of old dough was kept from the previous batch to begin the next. Women kneaded dough on wooden boards, sometimes singing as they worked. The dough rose under cloth near the hearth, absorbing the warmth of the home. Herbs or bits of dried fruit might be added for festival loaves. Regional recipes and family customs made every village's bread unique. Kneading was rhythmic, an act of patience and strength. Folding, pressing, resting. These gestures, repeated across generations, connected the baker with ancestors and descendants alike. Each step was intimate and embodied, a human touch shaping sustenance. Ovens and baking techniques. The earliest ovens were simple pits lined with stones. Later, dome-shaped ovens were built from clay and brick, designed to retain heat long after the fire was gone. A fire was lit directly inside the oven, and when the walls absorbed enough heat, the embers were swept out, and the bread was placed within. Some ovens used flat stones or tiles for the hearth floor. Loaves baked directly on the stone, forming thick crusts that sealed in moisture. In northern climates, baking occurred inside longhouses or kitchens, while in warmer regions, outdoor ovens kept the heat at bay. In cities, professional bakers formed guilds and operated large ovens capable of baking hundreds of loaves a day. These urban ovens were marvels of engineering, with chimneys, flues, and fireboxes that allowed for precise temperature control. The rhythm of baking echoed through city streets, announcing the morning with scent before sound. Feast and festival breads. On holidays and feast days, special breads were prepared. These loaves were often sweetened with honey or adorned with nuts, seeds, or spices. In some regions, symbolic shapes, braids, crosses, suns, were used to mark sacred time. Easter might bring round loaves with dyed eggs nestled in the center. Weddings were celebrated with towering ringed breads, torn and shared among guests. The act of gifting bread was a profound gesture, one that carried wishes of abundance, blessing, and unity. Some cultures baked soul breads for the dead, placed on graves or offered to the poor. Others set loaves at windows or doors as offerings to wandering spirits or seasonal deities. Bread linked the living and the dead, the earthly and the divine. Closing reflection. To bake bread was to participate in an ancient ritual, a quiet miracle repeating itself across centuries. With flour dust in the air and fire in the hearth, people shaped not only food but community, memory, and meaning. The oven was more than a tool, it was a hearth of heritage. In the act of baking, hands passed down wisdom that no scroll could capture, no monument preserve. The scent of bread rising is the scent of civilization itself, warm, sustaining, and eternal. In the deep folds of rural life, where nightfall blanketed the land in true darkness, light was a sacred gift. Before the flick of switches and the hum of electricity, illumination came from steady, flickering flames, each one a result of patient hands and centuries-old knowledge. Let us now step into the warm amber glow of a forgotten craft, the making of candles and lanterns. This chapter traces the journey from raw materials to radiance, where wax, fat, and fire told stories across the walls of ancient cottages. As the sun dipped behind distant hills, households prepared for nightfall with reverence. In communities without gaslight or electricity, the dark was total. One could barely see a foot ahead without a flame. Candles and lanterns were not just tools, they were guardians of the night. Children read stories by the dancing light. Farmers checked their tools one last time. Mothers rocked cradles beside soft glows. Light carried rhythm, safety, and soul. To illuminate was to extend the day, to claim a little more time for living. The process began with resources found or raised close to home. Beeswax was prized for its clean burn and sweet scent. Villagers kept hives in wicker skeps or wooden boxes, and harvesting wax meant careful removal of honeycombs. Tallow, a more accessible option, was made from rendered animal fat, often from cows or sheep. Though smoky and pungent, it was valued by those without bees. Housewives would slowly boil suet, skim impurities, and pour off clean fat to cool into solid blocks. Wicks were crafted from braided cotton or twisted flax. Farmers might reserve strips of old linen, soaked in vinegar or salt water to improve burning. The simplest method, and perhaps the most poetic, was candle dipping. A rod called a candle tree held strings of wicks. These were dipped one by one into hot wax, cooled, and dipped again, slowly building the candle in layers. Each dip brought the candle closer to usefulness. It was a meditative task, often done in silence or accompanied by hushed songs. In wealthier homes or monasteries, molded candles were preferred. Clay, tin, or even carved wooden molds were filled with hot wax and wicks held in place with pins. These produced uniform shapes, ideal for altars and fine lanterns. Where candles offered stationary light, lanterns provided mobility and protection from wind. Lantern making was a parallel craft, often handled by tinsmiths or skilled farmers. The body of a lantern could be fashioned from sheets of tin, carefully folded and soldered. Openings were cut for ventilation and light escape. Mica windows, thin slices of translucent mineral, or sheets of polished animal horn allowed the glow to shine through. Some lanterns had sliding doors or hinged lids, while others bore punch designs that scattered beautiful patterns onto walls. These were not just tools, they were humble art. Candles marked the passage of time. Some households had candle clocks, where the burn rate told the hour. A mark scratched into the wax might signal time for prayer, supper, or rest. Light was also a symbol. A candle in the window welcomed travelers or signaled a safe home. In religious rites, candles represented divine presence, hope, and guidance. Children would gather around lanterns to hear stories. Lovers whispered beneath their warm light. When someone passed, a single candle might burn through the night, a silent vigil of remembrance. Finished candles were kept in cool, dry cellars or hung from beams in bundles. Beeswax kept well, but tallow required care. Too warm and it softened, too damp and it soured. Lanterns were oiled, their hinges checked, and their windows polished with cloths dipped in vinegar. These humble tools were treated with quiet respect. To lose one in a storm was like losing fire itself. Families often had a ritual for lighting the first candle at dusk. It was done slowly, thoughtfully, a moment of transition from day to night. With the advent of kerosene, gaslight, and electricity, candle and lantern making faded. Factories replaced farms. Flame was no longer necessary, just nostalgic. Yet in pockets of the world, the craft lingers. Some still raise bees not only for honey but to honor the wax. Others carve lanterns for festivals or prayers. To light a handmade candle today is to bridge past and present, to touch the hands of ancestors who shaped light from raw earth. It is to remember that before wires and bulbs, there was wax and wick and wonder. And so, in the gentle flicker of a flame, we glimpse the old world, tender, handmade, and beautifully illuminated.